Okay, so we're ready, we're rolling. We're going to talk about this custom action figure that I made. And this is Skeletor, but it's not just any Skeletor, it's the Filmation version of Skeletor. If you're at all familiar with the designs of the Filmation television series, you probably noticed this instantly. This is not the regular Origin Skeletor figure. He's got the head and armor and sword and staff from the Super 7 Filmation figure. Now, as to why I made this figure, it's kind of a long story, which it starts when I first saw these figures at Toy Fair. Saw pictures of them online and said, oh my god, they're making new vintage-style He-Man figures. This is really cool. And basically what Super 7 had done was they didn't just remake the vintage He-Man figures, they decided to make vintage He-Man figures that looked like their Filmation designs. And I thought that was a pretty good idea because a lot of times, kids that watched the cartoon, wanted to have figures that looked like the cartoon. And this was a chance for us, at least as adults, to have those. So I bought 3 of them. I bought He-Man, and I bought Skeletor, and I bought She-Ra. And then tragedy struck. Hang on just a second. Fa-da-da-da-dee-da-dee-doo. Fa-da-da-da-dee-doo. All right, I'm back. So, when I bought this Skeletor figure, he was the second of the 3 that I bought. And I bought He-Man. I was pretty happy with He-Man. I noticed that his joints and his legs were a little stiff, but other than that, I thought it was a pretty good figure. And then I bought Skeletor, because, if you're only going to have one, you're probably going to pick either He-Man or Skeletor. If you're going to have 2, you definitely wanted to be He-Man and Skeletor. And the first time that I tried to move Skeletor's legs, hadn't even had this figure a whole day, leg just broke right off. And I didn't even try to move it with any kind of ridiculous force like you would think would try to move. I just kind of tried to move it like you would normally move a leg, and it just snapped right off. And my heart was broken. My heart was absolutely broken because I really loved this figure. It was a really nice looking figure, and it just broke on me, and it was so sad. I wound up buying that She-Ra figure because I really loved the She-Ra figure, and I wanted to have her. But even still, She-Ra, she's actually kind of sitting over here right now because I was taking some pictures with her earlier, and I just kind of put her on my shelf and didn't do anything with her because I was afraid she would break. So that's my sad story of those figures. I never bought any more of them. I heard that with the next few waves, they'd fix that problem, and then the legs didn't break anymore. That now the ones they made afterwards were fairly sturdy, but I was already burned, and it was too little too late for me. So even if I thought those figures looked pretty cool, I wouldn't buy them. I mean, they would have been great if I was a mint on card collector, and I just wanted to have the carded figures to display, but I'm not. I'm somebody who opens up my figures. So, to me, to have a figure that you can't move his legs for fear of breaking it, that's not a figure that, to me, is worth having. So, as beautiful as I thought the sculpting was, and everything like that, I just had this Skeletor just sitting in a bag in the trunk of my car for the longest time. And the He-Man, too. And they actually got kind of messed up while they were in the trunk of my car. When I pulled them out from afterwards, after that car broke down, I just put the bag into my storage space, and they were kind of messed up. And He-Man, it was just kind of like a scuff on his pec here, and I was able to use some Brasso and kind of sand that down and get it back to where it looks fairly normal now. He-Man never broke. He's fine. But I had this broken Skeletor figure, and I had the intention, what I figured I would do is try to see if, on eBay or something, if I could find, an old Mattel Skeletor figure for cheap. And if I could, I would just see if I could transfer the head and accessories onto that. But then, what happened was, they announced at the next toy fair after that Mattel themselves were going to do Masters of the Universe Origins figures, and they were going to look like the old figures, but they were going to be like much more articulated. And I was really excited about this, and it took forever for them to get these figures out. I think like when they announced them at Toy Fair, they said, "Yeah, they'll be coming next fall, not this coming fall." Suckers. No, the fall after that. So like a year and a half from now, we're going to put out these really awesome action figures. And I'm like, why do you tell me this now? I'm just going to be like chomping at the bit for these things. And I was. And now that I have them, I'm really happy. But yeah, so once I found out that there was going to be like this super articulated, vintage styled Skeletor, like that looked just like the vintage figure, but had like ridiculous articulation added to it, then I was like, okay, now I know what I'm going to do with this busted Super 7 Skeletor that I have. So I made this custom figure. Now, it did take a little bit of work, and I'm going to tell you how I did this, which is, I'm going to take the Havoc staff out of his hand. One of the things I don't like about this figure is that this hand does not grip as tightly as the Super 7 hand did. So you can see that like the Havoc staff is much more loose in his hand. He'll hold on to it. It won't fall out of his hand like too easily. I tried to heat up the hand and kind of curl in the fingers a little bit to give it a little bit more of a grip. And that works for a time, but it doesn't work permanently. And then the other accessory that I have him with is the solid purple power sword that he came with. Skeletor also came with, if I've got it here handy, I'll show you. And that's the He-Man one. If I'd have thought about it, I'd have went ahead and had this at the ready, but I didn't. He also came with a half purple power sword, which here I have paired up with the half that came with He-Man. So this was a nice homage to the original figure, how He-Man and Skeletor both came with half of the power sword, but they also had the solid power sword, so that was an option too. This is something that Mattel should have done with their Origins line. They should have had both the half power sword and the whole power sword. But maybe in the future they'll have purple versions and gray versions of the whole power sword. And hopefully it won't have the super thick handle like the Prince Adam sword has, because I'd kind of like them to hold them properly. Like, look at this. It's just going to kind of fall out of there because that's way too big for him to hold on to. So, I don't say these things because I hate the line. I say these things because I love the line and I want it to be better. So I make suggestions as to, this is how you can take what's already pretty awesome and make it even better. Anyway, back to talking about my custom figure that I made. So, in addition to the accessories that came with the Super 7 figure, he also had the armor and the loincloth that fit on him perfectly, because much like the Super 7 figure, this is based on the original Masters of the Universe figures, so it fits on there exactly as it should. And Skeletor's armor in the Super 7 does not have the problem that the He-Man armor in the Super 7 had. Like, I think the strap is still kind of low compared to the original Mattel figure, but it doesn't seem to want to fall off of him like He-Man does. It also wants to open up in the back the way He-Man's does when you try to put a sword in his back. So you can't really do that with this figure. You can't really store the sword in the back of the armor like you could in the old days. It just doesn't work, unfortunately. Which is too bad, because that was something we always liked doing with these figures. Now, to put this head on here, I had to do something a little drastic, because if you look at, let's compare how the Super 7 head is attached versus how the Origins head is attached. Now, if you look at the Origins, you can see how I just popped his head right off. There is a neck, which kind of tapers. It kind of curves upwards, almost into like kind of a dome type shape. But then there's a hole in it, and out of this hole sticks this peg with a little ball, and the ball fits into a socket on the head very easily. Just pop it on there like that, and voila, he's got a head. But if you look at how the Super 7 is set up, it's not like that. It is more like the original figure, where it's just a line straight across, because it's a head that just turns back and forth like this. Now, instead, the original figures, instead of having a peg here, they had a hole, and the peg was actually on the head, like a plug that plugged into the body. So Super 7, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why they designed it this way versus the original way. They instead have the plug on the top, and the head would plug into the top of the figure at the neck, and it could turn left and right, but did not have ball joint action. I'm actually really glad that Super 7 went with the peg, because it made this a lot easier for me. So what I had to do is, since it was completely flat at the bottom of here, and obviously I wanted the neck to fit into the head, is I had to Dremel out a hollow space in the bottom. And what I did was I had the Skeletor head from Mattel handy, and I had to just kind of eyeball it. And I was comparing the depth of the cavity here with his chin, because I figured the chin was going to be the thing that I wanted to be. That seemed like the thing that it would be most easy to keep as a control, would be the chin. Now you can see his hood actually drapes a little bit under the chin, so even then I had to kind of eyeball it and guess at it, and I think I did fine, because as you can see, he's on there, and his neck doesn't look too giraffe. It looks like well proportioned and everything like that. And thankfully, since he has the hood that drapes down in the front, it actually covers up his neck pretty well, and you can't really see it until you turn it to the side. And then you can kind of see it sticking out the side, but that's just going to happen. And plus, Skeletor's armor sits fairly high on his chest in this version anyway. But I think it looks fairly accurate to the Filmation version of the character, and that works pretty well. So after I'd hollowed out the little cavity at the bottom there, then I had to hollow out the ball socket. And what I did was I used my Dremel, and there's like a certain tool that, like, how best to describe it? That's another thing. If I'd have thought about it, I just brought the tool so I could show you. But basically, it's got like a little kind of carving ball at the top, like a ball with like like a notch cut out of it all the way around, and it's really good for getting in there. And I was able to shape a ball socket like what you see here, and I just kind of, a little bit of the time, would take a little bit more plastic out of that hole, careful not to make the lip of the hole any bigger than the lip of this hole, but at the same time, you can see how, like, it's got a bit more depth to it inside, because you want to be able to pop the lip of it around the ball joint, and then have it so it can still, move around. All the way around like that. So like I said, I just took out a little bit of a time until finally it popped right on. And once it popped right on, that's where it stayed. Now you can see, like, with this He-Man figure here, I'm able to just pop it on and off, and that's how it was designed. It was made to come apart like that. These Origins figures are designed so that kids can take the figures apart and put them back together and make weird mashup figures, make like a half He-Man, half Skeletor, that kind of thing. But this one, even though I got it on, it's on there, like, really good. And it's not so tight that you can't move the head around like you're supposed to be able to do. But it is tight enough that I don't feel like I can safely remove it again without risk of actually breaking the pin that the ball joint is attached to it. And I really don't want to do that. So I've basically just decided that head is just going to stay on there forever, and that's all there is about that. I mean, that's the end of that story. So that's fine. I don't need to be pulling his head off anymore. But if I did want to remove his head again for whatever reason, I figure I could probably boil it, stick it in some boiling water, hold it in there for like maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and that should soften it enough to come off. I figure probably also part of the reason that I was able to get it on there in the first place, but now it's kind of difficult to get off, is because, you know, when I was drumming it, obviously the friction would heat up the plastic, and with the plastic being heated up, that softens it. So yeah, that's probably a big part of the reason why, like, the head is now just on there permanently, or at least a lot more solidly than it would be originally. Alright, so let's discuss a few more things about this and what I did. So once I had the head on there, and the armor, and the loincloth, the legs, or the feet, which you can see the bottom where I didn't paint it, and we can compare with the head that I have, the extra Skeletor head that I have, that this figure came with. Hopefully the lighting is enough that you can tell that that's a different shade of purple. Like, this is a much darker and more vibrant, and I think kind of more bluish shade of purple. Whereas this is kind of a more neutral purple, but it's like, it's not quite as vibrant, and it's not quite as dark, and it's definitely not quite as blue. It's pretty accurate to the color that it was on the cartoon, where it was like, not quite lavender, but still like not like a deep royal purple like this one was. So when I put the armor and the loincloth and the hood on there, all that stuff matched up from the same figure, but these boots did not. They were that same purple that the original Origins figure was. So I picked out some paint from Walmart, just like cheap apple barrel paints, and I found the shade that was closest to it, and I painted the boots up like that. Now, that having been said, I'm not convinced that I'm going to leave these boots like this. This is the one thing that, like, I might wind up changing about this figure, because if you remember on the cartoon, and even if you don't remember on the cartoon, I can show you with the original Super 7 boot, is he just kind of had plain boots, look kind of similar to Batman. They look kind of like Batman's boots, just colored in purple. Whereas, you know, this is based on the original figure, and he's got these strange sort of boots with this kind of, I don't know if it's supposed to be feathery or scaly, but it's got this kind of texture on the shin area, and then the feet themselves are clawed. And I believe the reason the feet were shaped like this was because when they made the original line, they wanted to use the same boots for both Skeletor and Merman. And originally, Merman had webbed feet in the original designs, and Skeletor just kind of had bare feet with 5 toes, humanoid-looking feet, but with kind of sharp, pointy toenails, almost like claws. And then he had shin guards. And I guess to save a little bit of money, they decided to use the same feet for both for both Skeletor and Merman. And so they kind of did like a sort of halfway in between, where you could kind of buy these as being like webbed Merman feet, but at the same time they look kind of like just weird clawed demon feet for Skeletor. I'm not sure if these are supposed to literally be Skeletor's feet, like if he actually has feathery purple clawed feet, or if he just has some kind of weird ornate boots that are just supposed to look evil. I don't know. It's always been a mystery to me. Because, like I said, usually in the mini-comics, they depicted Skeletor as being barefoot. And I will just show you right now. Hang on a second. Let me grab the mini-comic book again. And, yeah, if we look at the way that Alfredo Alcala drew Skeletor, let me see if I can find a good shot here. Yeah, 5 toes on each foot with kind of pointy claw-like toes. And that's generally the way that he was always drawn in the mini-comics for the first few years. You can see that Mark Texeira drew Skeletor in much the same way. And even like the first mini-comics that came out after the animated series, Alcala was still doing the artwork for him. Skeletor still had boots or just the bare feet. But you can see here, now he's starting to draw him like the 3-toed feet. So it looks a little more like the toy, but still not exactly like the toy. And then by the time that Larry Houston became the main artist of the mini-comics, of course, Larry Houston's version of these characters was much more on model to the Filmation cartoon. But even then, still, sometimes you would see Skeletor with the toes. So I don't remember if Houston drew this one or not, but it definitely has a Houston influence if he didn't draw this one. I'm pretty sure it is Houston, though. So, but yeah, Skeletor's feet. Anyway, all that is moot, because this is supposed to be the Filmation version of Skeletor, so I should probably at some point give him plain boots. I just haven't got a pair of boots that I really want to do that with yet. But I do have the purple that matches up pretty well with the armor, even though I feel like this purple is still a little bit more vibrant, so I might try mixing in a little bit of gray with it. But I think this was like the closest shade of purple that they had. And then the very last thing that I did, and this was a lot of fun, was, again, to match the way he's drawn on the cartoon, I painted in his fingernails black, because remember, he had black fingernails on the cartoon. Those kind of pointy black fingernails. They're not quite as pointy as they are on the cartoon, but that's because, you know, there's only so much I can do with it. And, you know, I think just painting them kind of gives it enough of an emphasis on the black fingernails that Skeletor has. They don't really need to be that pointy. It still has the emphasis on it that I like. So, all in all, I'm pretty happy with how this figure turned out, and it was a good way for me to save my broken Super 7 Skeletor, and all it cost me was having to buy another Origins figure, because I did still want to have, like, an Origins Skeletor that was, you know, as the toy makers made it. So I've got a toy version and a Filmation version now. I would like to have a mini comics version of Skeletor, because I really like Alfredo Alcala's artwork, and the good news is that Target is going to do an exclusive figure where it's a Keldor. It's got a Keldor head and an Alcala-style Skeletor head, which both look like the same sculpts as classics, but hopefully they're made to fit on these bodies a little bit better, because I've tried to put the Alcala Skeletor head onto this body, and I kind of feel like it sits a little high on the neck. So hopefully they've fixed that problem for the one they're releasing for Target. I put the classics Keldor head on this body and it looked fine. It's just the Alcala head sits kind of high. But anyway, yeah. So that's that. Made me really happy that I was able to, you know, have this figure displayed on my shelf again without a broken leg. So, all right, that's pretty much it. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.